Hi, and here we are with Adventures from the Stream. We have a special episode coming to you today, special enough that I just whacked my mic stand. We have with us the main guy from Pickpocket Press. I love the name. We have, oh, I hear myself echoing. Do you hear me echoing?
I can hear a tiny bit of an echo.
Son of a biscuit. I should probably fix that. How about if I change? Well, you know what? Let's just go for now. I can deal with it. Um, so we have this guy from Pickpocket Press, and Pickpocket Press is a small indie RPG publisher. This is their bio over at Kickstarter. They have no committees, no shareholders, no marketing budget to speak of. They're all heart, baby. And they make the games that they want to play, and they hope that we want to play them too. So why do I mention Kickstarter? Well, Pickpocket Press has had 3 successful Kickstarter campaigns, from the Low Fantasy Gaming Deluxe Edition, which is less magic and more grit, to Low Life 2090, which is a tabletop RPG of cyberpunk and sorcery set in a dystopian 2090, to the Low Fantasy Gaming Companion expanded options for the Low Fantasy Gaming RPG. This guy I have with me is Steve Grodzicki, who is probably the most responsible for these things. Hi, Steve. How you doing?
Hey, Joe, how are you? I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Gosh, I got to fix that. Talk about a little the putting together the information that you needed to get Kickstarter going for you. And I'm going to try and like mute things here.
You have a go at that
Yeah.
echo effect. So with the Kickstarters, I think the main thing for me was ideally to have most of it written. I think, certainly with the first one, I had Low Fantasy Gaming Deluxe. It was all completely written. It was just a matter of, it was genuinely just a matter of trying to get money for art. So yeah, I think have it all written. In terms of, I guess I'd been pottering around with things for a couple of years on some websites. I had D&D Hackers Guild going just with some articles on, because I was trying to convert 5e right to this other game, like a low magic game, because I wanted to play Primeval Thule. I don't know if you know the setting from Sasquatch games.
I don't.
Oh, right. Well, it's this amazing Conan-like sword and sorcery, wilderness, giant beasts, evil sorcerers type setting. And anyway, I wanted to play it with 5e, but I felt like I couldn't anyway, so I was trying to tweak things. So yeah, I was tweaking things for a couple of years. So I did have that, and I had the Low Fantasy Gaming site already, so I was doing those things. So I did have that already. I had a little bit of a speck of a presence in the internet, and then otherwise, yeah. So they were the main 2 things for me. That prior to that first Kickstarter, I wanted it all written and a little bit of a presence, and it was similar with the other Kickstarters in the sense that I think Low Fantasy Gaming Companion was about 90% written, and Low Life was like 80% written. So I think ideally you should come to the Kickstarter with it completely written, but sometimes the timing doesn't quite match up or whatever, because there is a little bit of a strategic, I don't know how much it works, but I think that there are other projects coming, and you don't want to launch at the same time some other major project is taking off. So
Yeah, definitely.
sometimes you got to try and, I don't know, that's what I felt like anyway, that I better try and launch this one now. And I know that if I give myself a good 6 months, which is the usual amount of time I'll give myself, or 8 months I think I gave for low life because there was that extra 20% still to write. So, yeah, I think they're the main things. Is you ideally want it mostly written already, rather than sort of jumping in with just the idea. And if you can have a bit of a presence beforehand, I think that's good. Obviously, advertising helps too, but
oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, for me, the best advertising platform for me seemed to be Facebook and Instagram. So anyone who's thinking about kicking off one of those Kickstarters soon, that seemed to be where I got people coming who would pledge. And you know what? For me, Reddit and Twitter and stuff I threw some money into those, but didn't seem to. I don't know. It's a bit hard to tell because I think the Kickstarter site, it will log it if someone comes from that particular, wherever they come from.
Okay.
The advertising you've sent them, it will log it, but it will only log it if they pledge straight away. So if, for example, people do what I do, which is often I'll just have a look at the Kickstarter at first. I won't pledge straight away. I'll go, oh yeah, that looks cool. I'll come back and have a look at that later.
Do you click that little heart to save it for later?
Oh, I don't even know if I do. I just sort of look at it. Sometimes I might.
Yeah.
And then I'll wander away, and then I'll come back, and I might come back a few times, and then I'll pledge if I'm going to. So I don't think that would necessarily track, where they first saw it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, but
yeah. So I'm curious.
It seemed to be Facebook for me.
With Pickpocket Press, you use the term "we." Is that Steve and the people he asks to help, and the people he commissions for art, etc., or is there more to the "we" than just Steve?
The main "we" is that Pickpocket Press is a partnership between myself and my wife.
Okay.
So Steph does the editing, the layout, proofreading. So if there's any editing errors, blame Steph.
That makes me think. I was reading through some of the posts on lowfantasygaming.com, and I thought there was some typos, but I think you just spelled it out for me. So there's an S.J. Grodzisky, and then there's an S.D. Is that it?
So Steph what's Steph's middle name? Grace. So
she's
SGG.
That's what it is. SG and SJ.
Yep, so if there's any typos, that's completely Steph's fault. You can blame her.
Outstanding.
And Steph also does a fair bit of the art curation type things. She will help out with art descriptions, art briefs, bits and pieces like that. But mainly she has to do the slog, which is the editing, which sucks. That's the worst part of it. That's the worst part.
That's why you've got to learn to have good grammar and spell check before you hand it over to her, right?
Oh my God! You know what? You can edit something to the end of time. That's my feeling on it. And so anyway, you got to have, at least you got to have a number of sets of eyes on these things to try and pick up, the different typos that you just sort of gloss over. The short version is Steph and I, it's a partnership. That's cool. That's the way.
Great. And for those who can't tell by the accent, Steve Grodzicki is your typical Irishman. He's so he's in Australia, as was mentioned in the bio. They're out of Sydney, and it's interesting in the bio. It's since August of 2016. I started the Adventures from the Shed audio podcast in September of 2016. We actually had some stuff from 2014, but where we really started pushing was in 2016. So we've got similar birthdays in that case.
Cool. I can't believe it's been that long, actually.
It's crazy, huh? Yeah.
It seems like a decent amount of time.
Yeah, so we've been at Adventures from the Shed, and now for the online part, Adventures from the Stream, we've been around for, I guess it'd be 6 years total, but mostly 5 when it comes to the online part. And we're pushing to get more people to listen to what we have to say. And part of that is reaching out to different people within tabletop RPGs, and I'm trying to kind of spin it more towards how are we playing online nowadays, because there aren't a lot of face-to-face games going on. And that brings me to something that we've talked about a little on Discord, Foundry Virtual Tabletop. One of the things that actually turned me on to the Low Fantasy Gaming system is that there is a downloadable LFG system within Foundry Virtual Tabletop, and that's pretty cool. It has compendium information, some charts, some monsters, some items, etc. And it made me start looking, and I said, what's LFG? Because clearly he's not looking for group, right? This has to be something else. So I go look up Low Fantasy Gaming, and personally I'm immediately hooked on the idea of low fantasy, but fantasy gaming, right? So it's the idea of, like you put, less magic, more grit. I have to confess, as a dungeon master, game master myself, I mostly let the characters get through alive, and I'm very curious, which is various if you combine those words. I'm various about how that's going to play out, how much of my own inner angels I'll have to fight when I get to playing Low Fantasy Gaming to make sure my players feel the grit of the game system. I'm really curious to see how that works out. And speaking of Foundry, I thought it'd be fun to use Foundry to put forth some questions that people have submitted for you, Mr. Steve, and we can do that by the magic of green screens and technology and, well, all kinds of stuff. So what we're going to try here is, within the Foundry Virtual Tabletop, there's a thing called roll tables, and I've created a roll table with some questions for Steve. And I've given Steve a button to click to get at those questions. So let's see what we can get out here first. See if he remembers. There's a button. It's the one that says questions for Steve. There it is.
Oh, I was muted for a second. Sorry, my dog is going off. Give me 1 second.
That's all right. I'll
deal
sit
with
here.
the dog with this phone. Hang on 1 sec.
Go for it. See you in a moment, Steve. So we have, for those who are curious about what just happened on the screen here, we've got Foundry Virtual Tabletop World loaded up, and I'm using that as a background or an overlay so we can see the dice rolling, and I'm also have the chat overlay so that Steve can see the question that comes up when he clicks that button to make the random roll. And we've got the little avatar from the Discord channel for the people who ask the questions. So for this one, Steve, JD wants to know, do you have any general advice for those looking to enter publishing like you did? You kind of covered that a little bit when you talked about the beginnings of Pickpocket Press, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think, so for me, what worked for me anyway was to, you know what, I think first of all, you have to love doing this sort of thing to be in it, at least at an indie level, like I am and many of the creators are. So I think you really got to, you got to love doing it. But secondly, I think it's worth putting up a website, you know what I mean? Where you can share your stuff really easily. You control what goes out. People can comment there. You can still share it on all your favorite, you know, forums and sites, but I think it's definitely worth having a website of your own. And, you know, you can create those for free. So the Low Fantasy Gaming site was originally a free site through WordPress. And now we pay a very, you know, reasonable fee just to, I think we got the, you know, the domain name locked down or whatever, and a few other bits and pieces, but we haven't gone to the full extent where you can, for example, sell PDFs through the website. We just do it through drive-through, and that would be another piece of advice. I think drive-through is where you would start out putting things, or maybe on DM's Guild. I know, I think that does really
I think well. That's gotten really popular.
Yep. The only thing about DM's Guild is that I understand, I'm not 100% sure, I'm not on DM's Guild, excuse me, but I understand that there's very restrictive rules on
Yeah.
your ownership of your IP there. So I think if you publish there, you basically sell your IP rights to
Yeah,
Wizards or
and that
whoever
can be
it is that
concerning.
maintains that site.
Yeah.
Yep. So look, if you're thinking, if you are thinking longer term and you want to hang on to some particular ideas, and I think that's not the place to publish.
Right.
Oh, look, and look, I'm not 100% sure on all that. I'm just going off what I've read in different forums because I sort of had to think about it. But certainly, Drive Through RPG by itself is a massive site, and just putting
Yeah.
stuff there will get it in front of people. So I think, yeah, create your own website, put stuff on Drive Through. I think ideally, yeah, you do it because you love it, and you might make some extra cash, within a short period. But in terms of turning into a full-time job, it's not a full-time job for me.
No.
This is like an awesome side hustle, I would call it.
That's great.
I love doing it. It can be hard work. I feel like it's always, I've got two jobs. Like I've got my day job, and then I've got my my sort of publishing side of things. And I love it. I love doing it. But so look, I think generally maybe the main couple of tips is create own website to put stuff out, or blog about it. Yeah, that's also really fun. Just talking about this is why I'm designing in this way. These are the reasons why I'm changing this particular set of rules to this particular, because people want to they want to agree with you, or they want to argue with you, or they want to they want to interact with you. So that seems to work pretty well. So website.
I think that piece is a huge, important beginning piece. Don't immediately subject yourself to all the criticism. Now, don't isolate yourself from it, but start in a place where you can at least control that criticism and where you can refer people to your information in its virgin form. So you've got your website, it has exactly what you want on it. WordPress, other places, you can actually remove commenting or just not allow it to begin with. And then just refer people right from your WordPress site over to your Facebook page or your Discord server where you can have that discourse and make sure that you're hearing both sides of the rules change that you've come up with. And I think that's definitely a great approach. I like that. Do you want to see what we have next in store?
Okay. Here we go.
Steve gets to roll dice in an interview.
I'm rolling dice. Look at that, 16.
So these ones with the little Adventures from the Stream logo are my questions, the host questions here. In regards to fun, so this is categorized, right? So fun. This goes back to any character that you've either played or watched someone else play. What has been your favorite out of that, and what is it that made you remember it and say, damn, that was cool?
Oh, that's a really hard one.
Isn't it?
That's a really hard one. I've sort of got two. I mean, I always recall this gnome. It was in a Spelljammer campaign, actually. If you know the old D&D 20 years ago campaign where you were floating around in magical ships in space, right?
Spelljammer. Why
it's
not?
About as out there as the D&D games tend to get. And I had this little gnome sorcerer who blew up his own ship. So that was pretty funny. And he was just he was a riot to play. He was like a pyromaniac, really, which, half of my sorcerers are. But that particular one, because he was a gnome, I still remember him. More recently, that was a long time ago. More recently, I had this really awesome ranger, actually, called Nissa, who was an elf it was in a 13th Age game, if you know. Do you know 13th Age?
I'm aware of it. I think that's Pelgrane Press, but I have not played
really
it
terrific.
yet.
Yeah, really terrific system, and easy to play and quick to play. But and she was just like a cheeky thing. But the funniest part, the reason I remember her or enjoyed playing that character so well, she was really fearless in the combat, but she was undone by her fearlessness. And we were using the I don't have it here, but we were using, as we always do in my group, we always mix in rules from other places. So we grabbed the Pathfinder critical hit deck, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, she was fighting some demon. She went at it with her two-handed sword, fumbled. The sword lodged in the doorway or something. The demon came for her, and then it rolled a critical. And then pulled from the table, decapitated.
Nice.
It was the best. It was the best end to poor old Nissa that I could have wished for. It was really just such an awesome scene, and we were all like, "What? No!" She was such. Anyway, it was so fun.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question that we just got from Jason on YouTube. Would like to know if low fantasy gaming can be comparable to a Call of Cthulhu in terms of difficulty and grittiness.
Well, that is an interesting question because I have never played Call of Cthulhu. I know I've heard about it so much. I've never actually played it. I do know that it's supposed to be that the combat, I don't know, I've heard different things about the combat. I've heard if you try and fight, the sort of elder things, obviously you're instantly destroyed, but I think there is sort of a gradation of threats. I think the common sort of guys with their Tommy guns and stuff aren't too bad. You can sort of fight them.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to compare. I think with Call of Cthulhu, because I haven't played it, but I think LFG is... The objective was to try and put it somewhere. I didn't want it to be as deadly as, for example, basic D&D, where if you hit 0, you are dead. No rolls, no nothing, you're just dead.
Yeah.
But I didn't want it at the other end of the spectrum, which for me is 5e, where it gets 3 death saves, over a very long time.
Yeah.
You got bonus action, ranged, healing word at first level to pop people back up automatically.
Yeah.
I didn't want that either. So we went for a middle ground where if you hit 0, first of all, no healing magic works. It takes 1d3 minutes to get back up from 0, so you can instantly heal if you're above 0. But once you hit 0, you're in a special state, and the magic just takes longer, right? So once you're down to 0, you're out of that combat. There's no way to bring you back into that present combat. You'll be back for the next combat, assuming you survive, but you won't be back for this one. Yeah. And so what happens is then we've got the roll the body rule where someone has to check on you. So an ally checks on you after the combat, and then you make a con check. If you make the con check, you live. If you fail the con check, you die. So it's only one roll, but if you have a reroll pool die, so all the classes get a reroll pool for skills mostly, but it also applies to your all dead or mostly dead checks, right?
I like that.
So if you fail your con roll, you're dead. But if you've got a reroll, you can do it again. So actually, if your con is... The statistics are actually pretty good. If your con is 10 or better and you've got a reroll, you effectively have about a 75% chance of living. So it's not too difficult to not die, as long as you've got a reroll up your sleeve, depending on your con. And so that's where it sits. I feel like it sits sort of in between. It's not as harsh as basic D&D. It's not as favorable as 5e. It's somewhere in the middle. And in terms of Call of Cthulhu, I'm not sure where it would sit, but I feel like it certainly is grittier than 5e, if that's any indication, but it's not as bad as basic D&D.
I'm wondering if part of the question may be more along the lines of, in D&D, 5e, eventually you'll be a hero in this world. In Call of Cthulhu, the world will consume you, either your mind or your body, eventually, and how long will you last? Where does LFG fit in that spectrum? Closer to the world is going to kill you, or you will rule the world? You're somewhere in the middle there.
I think, that's a good point. I think definitely more towards somewhere the world is going to kill you, because in LFG, it's if you survive that all dead or mostly dead check, you roll on the injuries and setbacks table, and that can be something minor, like a minor scar, or an item is, your weapon is broken or it's damaged and needs to be repaired. But it can also be, for example, you lose an eye, or you lose an ear, or you lose your leg, right?
Ouch.
So over time, even if your adventure is surviving, so it's just, the idea is you want to avoid trying to get to 0 hit points. Even if you're going to survive, say you're a barbarian with 17 con and a reroll, it's actually quite hard for him to die, as long as someone is there to roll his body and check him, right? So as long as he doesn't get isolated or it's a total party wipe. It's quite hard for a barbarian to die. But he could pick up, missing eye, missing arm, all sorts of things. And in addition to that, we also have a madness a pretty reasonable madness system in there, which is, it's role-playing based. You know, we give a series of D20 table with different effects, but it doesn't say, just for example, I don't know, psychosis, it'll say something else. Or instead of delusions, it will say, you know, there'll be an example of seeing a shadowy woman in the bough of the tree, and, you know, anyway.
That's cool.
And it takes quite a while to get rid of madness in low fantasy gaming, and magic is pretty, that's one of the things we tweak too with the magic, is you can't just, there's no spell that just gets rid of madness instantly. It takes a little while. So the idea is, if you do have the magic to remove it, it will kind of stick with you for this adventure, and then you might get rid of it by the next one.
I'm chuckling here because I feel like there's an inside Joe doesn't know low fantasy gaming enough here yet. But some days over on Twitch, when you were describing downsides, bad things, replied, or grow fish limbs. So you can grow fish limbs? Is that something that's happened?
In the Dark and Dangerous Magic Check is one of my favorite parts of the game. So, and this came about because, as I mentioned very briefly at the start, I wanted to play Primeval Thule, and one of the things about that magic style is that it's corrupting and dark, and so, and also it's a bit unpredictable, right? Well, that's the idea. It's mysterious and unpredictable, which is the opposite of 5e magic, which is dead certain, always works, and has no danger in it, right? You always get what you want. So the Dark and Dangerous Magic Check in LFG, every time you cast a spell or use a magic item, so this applies to anybody, fighters using their magic ring or whatever. Every time you use magic, you roll d20. If you roll a 1, you trigger a Dark and Dangerous Magic effect. If you do not trigger it, it keeps going up by 1 until the end of the adventure. So if you cast 10 spells during the adventure, you're eventually going to be rolling against an 11. And, you know, almost certainly you would have triggered it before then, because something will have happened. But the Dark and Dangerous Magic table includes stuff like, grow fish limb, or I don't know. There's my favorite one is the one where your jaw extend. It turns you into this massive jaw, like this waddling creature with a huge jaw that tries to eat everybody.
I think that's my brother.
And but the DDM table is not all bad. It's just what I tried to do with it was to make it, I wanted it to be dangerous, and not just dangerous to the caster, but everyone around the caster. So someone else nearby might, for example, be turned mad by your casting of the spell. So it wasn't necessarily I didn't want people to look at it as a nerf to casters necessarily, unless you think that the randomness that attaches to it is a nerf, and in some ways that is, but I think that's okay. But some of the things are also good, so you might trigger the DDM effect and end up your spell is extra powerful, for example. But I have to say, I purposely only put in about 10% of good effects, you know, and then there's 10 or 20% of definitely bad effect, and then there's like 70% of what I would call neutral effects, where you're not really, they're dangerous effects. So for example, a hideous monster, there's this cool table with, I think it's cool, with these terrible monsters on it, where you summon something from the rift, right? And it appears, and it's hungry, and it wants to eat everybody in the vicinity. But so it's dangerous to everyone, not just the caster who has created it, but yeah, anyone else. So it can actually help you. And I've heard many stories actually of in the PC parties where they say, oh yeah, you know, we triggered the Wraith or whatever, and it came out and it actually attacked the enemy, and that let us escape. I'm like, yes.
That's great. Yeah.
So
yeah. So the bad thing comes out, and you know, the charismatic person in the party points at the other bad thing and says, it was him, right? Have you chased that guy?
Yeah. There's a role to figure out how close it appears to the caster or wherever it's going to end up. And so if you get lucky, it might end up closer to your baddies, for example. Is another way it could end up cool. Feasting on them rather than feasting on you.
So before we click on the next question, I want to mention also from Twitch, D. Bareford mentioned, gotta love the Jaws, just led to an epic PC death. So That sounds like
Oh, yeah,
another
that's the one.
DDM thing that happened.
That's the what. That's that one I was mentioning.
That's
Yeah,
the Jaws.
yeah.
Nice.
It's called Jaws. Yeah, and some of those effects, I should say, if you roll 98 or 99 or 100 on the table, you roll for one of those, sort of like a body horror style transformation,
okay,
and
yeah.
it's permanent. Yep. So you can end up with a crab arm or, whatever cool
what is it from
tentacle thing.
the Schwarzenegger movie with the thing that comes out of the chest, coatl or whatever it was? Yeah, that thing.
Yeah.
You end
Total
up with
Recall.
another being inside of you. Ew.
Total Recall. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Total
Actually,
Recall. Gosh.
We put an entry on there similar to that in it might be in the low life one, but where this, like, with a hideous slipping plop, this thing comes out of you like a doppelganger thing, and then it tries to kill you or run away and kill you later. Anyway.
All right, let's see how many other questions we can get through in the time we've got.
All right, here we go.
Get that another one. Oh, yeah. So also from Discord, King Cthulhu, which is a kind of a neat name. Curious what your favorite class is. My first assumption is within LFG, but maybe you've got others as well.
Well, with in just general, in just general, I suppose D&D or gaming, I did always tend to go for the wizard types, but you know what? I'm always a combat guy. I do prefer the classes that can fight. That's the part of the game that I like the most is the gameplay, combat sort of gameplay usually, rather than. I like cool stories and stuff, and I like dropping the one-liners and things, but I mostly am about playing the game as opposed to doing too much of the role-playing and stuff. I tend to let the other guys jump in with that, and I'll contribute from time to time, but I tend to be the focusing on the combat.
Point me at what needs to be killed, right? And I'll take care of it.
Yeah. And they're the things that I remember the most is how guys died or like awesome stunts and stuff. I don't know. They're the things that, for whatever reason, that's what I tend to remember.
It's interesting that you use that terminology, how something dies, and then you also said you really like the spellcasters, and then one of your favorite characters was a gnome sorcerer who blew up his own spaceship. So you've kind of covered everything you like in that one favorite character.
There it is.
That's pretty cool.
In LFG, I think I probably like the fighter the best. I tried to make the fighter, a bit different with the stances that he can go into, he or she, and being able to switch between the stances, and the little supplies ability where they can sort of miraculously pull out something that they happen to have to hand, which they planned before the adventure.
Of course,
unbeknownst to anyone. So I really like the idea of the fighter in LFG, and they work well with the major exploits and the rescues and all that. They're good at that stuff because they're good at hitter things. So and you have to hit first to do these other effects usually. So yeah.
Cool. Well, let's see what we have next for a question here.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah, that's you. And now I can click it, but it's so much cooler for you to do it.
18.
All right, so in 18, that brings me one of the host questions. So, obviously, you've been involved with tabletop RPGs. You've been involved with the online stuff. So, for me, the future of RPGs in general, it still keeps steering digital. What do you think? Digital, analog, combination, how does it seem to you for the future?
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, and that's a sort of better or worse scenario, I think, for me. I definitely think it's leaning more into playing online these days, and especially, for the next couple of years or whatever, while they sort out COVID in all the different countries. I think it's definitely, and I think there's a certain draw as well. I think a lot of people like to play the RPGs these days in a way that is, reflective of the computer games where you've got all the tokens on the screen, everyone's moving them around. You got the cool special effects and the visual effects, but also the sound effects. You got all these things happening on the screen, which entertains everybody. So I think it's definitely online. And I think that I was speaking to someone on the Discord about this before, just recently, about how I think that is actually something worth thinking about in designing the games at the moment and into the future, is how they're going to be played. And they're probably, a lot of them are probably going to be played online. So when you're designing how the functions are going to work and what dice you're going to use, and are you going to use cards and all these sorts of things, I think that's something to bear in mind, is how is this going to translate onto Foundry or onto Roll20 or onto Fantasy Grounds.
And onto
yeah,
your
the
inevitable AAA digital game on Xbox once they love your intellectual property, right? Like Cyberpunk will eventually make a lot of money. It probably wasn't intended to do that at the beginning.
I know. Oh yeah, of course. I didn't
Yeah.
even think about that. Of course,
Yeah.
that's right. That game, was from the 80s or whatever, and now, 40 years later.
Yep.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
Jesus, somehow,
you can't expect Sean Connery to be doing your voiceovers anymore, but somebody can be, and they may be paid, $500,000 to do a voiceover on something you created in 2016. You never know.
Well, look at that's right. Look at is it Keanu Reeves or something in I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't actually played it, but it did look freaking awesome
Yes.
to me. And
Looks very cool.
Keanu Reeves stuff, and I'm going, what the hell?
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Why not? For me, some of the first ones were the Rockstar games, the Grand Theft Auto. They started getting some real talent, like the music that you can play through the car stereo in a Grand Theft Auto game is music that someone composed for that video game, so you could flip between radio stations, right? It's not just a background music for a certain scene. It's you sitting in a stolen car, flipping through radio stations and listening to just random stuff.
That stuff is so fun too.
Yeah.
I've played a little bit of GTA. I don't know, not all of them. Obviously, there's so many of them, but some of the older ones, and it is so fun. That's right. So you steal the car, burn it around, and you can change the stations, and they're talking to you and doing all sorts of stuff. Yeah, it's really cool.
Cool. All right, what's up next?
Okay, here we go.
Oh, so this kind of goes along with the same question, what character you like. Now, what game session? Either a game session you've been a part of or watched someone else play. Where was the coolest part? Where did that sit, and why?
That is another hard one, but I'm gonna go with I probably would have defaulted to that one where my poor ranger got decapitated, but I will instead go to, there was a game on Hobbs and Friends a little while ago, maybe 12 months ago or something, and I forget now who exactly all the participants were, but they were in a serpent men temple. They went in there, they somehow triggered, there was a magical ward on this statue. They somehow trigger it, and one of the guys goes mad, right? He thinks that the others, he's seeing snake things. He thinks that the rest of the party is his enemy, and he ends up, there's all sorts of roles being made, but he ends up attacking his own party, and then they're trying to tackle him in a way that would restrain him, in a way that wouldn't kill him, but they can't, and he ends up killing like half the party, and then he runs off down the hall. He runs off because he's the fighter, right? And the other guy's just got a bit unlucky or something, so he's striking him down left and right, and then he runs off down the hall into the darkness, and the other guy's going, oh my god, we can't stop him. And I think that character ended up leaving the group because it was just too, I don't know, he couldn't get back from having slain two of those guys. But that is a recent one that really sticks in my mind.
Cool.
And I stuck that on the website. I put all Hobbs's links on there, but and a bunch of all different people's. Anytime I see someone playing LFG on a video or whatever, I stick it on the site. But
that makes me curious. Do you have a link up there for my half-hour reading of your table of contents now?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. It's on the there's on the website. There's I forget what I just rejigged the website.
Community content, I think.
Yeah, I put a special. I made that its own page because it was everything was getting too muddled up with each other. But the videos are actually on the products and content page, and there's like a media. If you scroll down a little bit, not very far, there's a media part, and all the video stuff is in there.
That's cool.
Yep. So you're on there.
Cool.
Like it or not, you're already there.
I was genuinely curious what you thought of somebody doing a half-hour in-depth review of your table of contents.
Well, look, I like it.
Yeah.
I like seeing people go through it and going, what the hell is this?
Exactly.
What the hell is this? I actually think, so Joe, I reckon, I'm not sure how much, I think you will, when you have a chance to have a look at it all, I think you will like most of LFG, but I think there will be parts you won't like. I don't know. That's just my impression. I think
Okay.
there will be bits that will not probably sit with you as well as other parts. But anyway, I'm interested to see. How it all turns out.
Yeah, I'll call you into it here, but maybe we can have you for our first live game session when we get around to it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely.
So now I won't hold you to that, but it has been recorded. So let's go on to the next question. See what we've got next.
All right, here we go.
A 10? Oh, this one's also from me. This one I'm genuinely curious of. I'm getting that various and curious again. Anyway, Kickstarter. The campaign ends. What does Steve, the Pickpocket Press, what do you have to do now? I mean, 800 and something people said, yeah, I'll back you. You're obligated to do something? What happens the moment that ends?
So much goes on after the campaign ends. So much. So it's mostly, well, first of all, you got to finish. If you haven't finished writing the thing, for me, like for example, the Low Life, the latest book, you've got to finish writing it, and there's a lot of playtesting that's going to go into that as well with my home group, and if I can get others to playtest it as well, obviously I'll sit down with them too. But so there's the writing, the playtesting. The artwork is a massive part of it, actually. So until, the thing funds, we can't really go too far ahead with our briefs for commissions for the different illustrations that we're after. And the other thing is that until we have the format, till the layout is finalized, it's a bit hard to know where we want, a quarter page illustration or a half page. And then, there's we want some full page illustrations in there as well. So the art is a pretty large part of it. And then, updates. So every month we need to do an update to let people know how it's going, because you put the money in, you want to know what's happening, happening with that product. Although we get a real range of, and I assume this is the same with all the indie creators, you get a real range of people. So some people will just back because they want to back something that's different, or because they like your past product and they're happy to throw some money at you to try and keep things going. Even if they're not super interested in this campaign, maybe they'll be interested in the next one.
I can say when one of the things that I've been curious of, how you respond to your two extremes. I've been in backed plenty of Kickstarter Indiegogos, and when it's done, I'm that guy that says what you just said. I'm in it to back you. I want to see your product, your service, your idea come to life. But if it never does, I've hopefully given you incentive to keep going and deliver something to somebody eventually, right? But
right.
You have that person. And then you have the person where, yes, you said monthly updates, and they're going to say, I want to hear more than monthly. So you're going to do bi-weekly. And they're going to say, why do we have to wait 2 weeks for an update? All you're doing is writing a book, right? So can't you just tell us each day what you've written? And if you don't, you suck, and you don't know what you're doing, right?
Well, happily, I haven't had anyone who's that keen. My stuff mustn't be that good.
Well, you let me know when the next one comes up, and I'll back it for you.
But I think you know what, the Discord or your Reddit or whatever that you're going to have that's going to come along with the Kickstarter campaign, ideally anyway. Certainly, I think Discords are awesome for the chit chat. That just goes on day to day. So if you've got someone who's super keen, you'd probably see them in there and be able to chit chat with them there, and they can get the inside goss, you know what I mean? Rather than rather than trying to speed up your I can't imagine doing more than a monthly update on the Kickstarter type project. You've got so much going on, and it takes a little bit of work to create that post in a succinct sort of way that is hopefully, providing the latest update in a reasonable sort of fashion, not sort of sprawling and stuff everywhere. It takes a little while to put that together, so I wouldn't want to be doing that more than once a month. But I think in Discord and all that, you could do it that way, and that's totally cool. Like, that's fun because everybody feeds off each other's energy. So if you've got those real keen guys, then that will come through, and that gives you more impetus, of course, to make that final product, get it to the door so that it is finally out. Because of course, until it's out, I can't imagine not producing something. If the Kickstarter funds, then the people are getting something, and ideally they're getting exactly what you've promised. But I barring some kind of terrible, illness or something like that, I can't imagine you wouldn't produce anything. And you can safeguard that too by, that's right, having it almost all written or completely written by the time you take it to Kickstarter, so
where you're just something, like you said, figuring out your art commissions, how big they're going to be, what the layout's actually going to be before you can send it to publishing, if you're doing hardcover, etc. I'm not sure how much. I'm not sure how much more time you want to spend today, but we definitely have more questions. I don't know how long your lunch break is.
I can do a couple. Yeah, I can do a couple. Let's do a couple more. But
sure.
Technically, that's right. I can't hang around too long. let's not go into it too much. That's
I
right.
won't tell anyone.
The creating of proof copies of things like, you won't be able to see it. I'll put it in front of my head.
Yeah, it's because I've had to adjust for your sunlight.
No, it's totally fine. So the producing of proofs is a real, that takes a long time. That's a disadvantage I've got here in Australia, because I have to order the stuff at express post prices, which is a lot, but also it just takes a long time to get here. So that's another thing that keeps me busy. I'm up to like the 5th. We've got the 5th proof coming, and that it should be right. As far as I'm concerned, it's going to be all right, but
cool.
You never know until you see it.
Exactly.
All right,
let's go ahead. See what's coming up next. Oh, what's coming up for you when it comes to the RPG world? Are you looking at any more expansions to something you've already got? New ideas in the works for something completely different? Partnerships with anyone else? And of course, not obligated to answer anything that would violate anyone's trust, but I'm just curious, where do you go next?
Yep. That is a good question. At the moment, so we're focused on just finishing off the low life core rules and getting those out there. And then beyond that, we'll still, of course, be doing, we have the Patreon thing where we put out adventure frameworks for low fantasy gaming, and we're also now doing Low Life 2090, so we're just doing those. We're alternating them month to month at the moment, so we'll certainly continue doing those. In terms of another largish book, it depends a little bit on how Low Life goes, but I would like to do some kind of expansion to that, similar to Low Fantasy Gaming Companion. With, you could easily add more cyberware, more weapons,
of course,
a large section on the city. There's all sorts of stuff that could be done, but it just depends on how things go. But also, we've sort of got in mind, at the moment, we've got our Midlands book, which is one of our first books, which is like a campaign setting sandbox toolkit thing. That's, at the moment, if you want that in hardback, it's got to come from Lulu, because we started out with Lulu printing, just because they've got because they've got a printer in Australia, and you can get proofs within 5 days instead of 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks from 2 to 4 weeks from drive-through, but in the UK. But so we were thinking about whether it would be worth switching that over to drive-through and maybe tweaking little bits of that. So that might be something that wouldn't be too much work, you know what I mean? Because it's already written. Just redo the cover, some bits and pieces, but so that might be something we could look at towards the end of this year. But beyond, the end of this year. I don't know.
Yeah. It's out there. Yeah.
It's over there. Yeah.
Yeah, I do know actually that there's a few. I should mention there's a few community content based books coming out. There's Goblin Scribe's got his equipment. Class Compendium coming out. We've got Wiki Snapper's got his this massive, and it's awesome. I've seen the draft of it. Massive equipment book coming out. Anyway, there's some bits and pieces coming out. I think Zach's working on his Dawn World setting. Actually, I don't know if that's going to have a LFG. I think it will have an LFG aspect to it anyway. But I do know there's some books. There are some books coming. Oh, and of course the Varnor book. There's the Varnor book coming from Lauren and Simon and all those guys. So there is some other stuff coming, but that sort of third-party stuff rather than stuff that we're making.
All right. We'll shoot for another one.
All right, one more we better do, and then I better.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right. So speaking of Goblin Scribe, so for Low Life 2090, what is something you had to cut that you would have liked to have kept?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, that is, what I didn't cut it as much as I wanted to put it in, but didn't end up having room for it. Was more variants on the different firearms. So, for example, in the vehicle section, we've got all various four-wheel drives and sedans and whatever. Well, actually, what we've got is one, and then we'll say, and there's some comparable ones with 3 or 4 other names of other vehicles that are similar, but you can sort of use the same stat block. And I wish I had done that. I wanted to do that with the firearms. So you might have the Ruger Imperator is the big heavy pistol, and I would have loved to have 3 or 4 variants, just the names of other different guns under there, so that you can just to add some flavor to the world. But that is something that would have added a few more lines, but to each weapon entry, and so it would have added a whole other page or something, and so I had to cut that. But so that would be something that could be cool as a little, that's the sort of thing actually that could easily be made by us as just a PDF thing. Here's some more extra weapons, here's some more cyberware, here's some more spells, and then if you get enough of that built up, compile it, stick it in a book.
Yes, your Low Life Compendium #1, right? Just your first add-on. That's very cool. Very cool.
Something like that.
Well, Steve, it was a pleasure to have you on here. Just really looking forward to myself using the Low Fantasy Gaming setting in our Adventures from the Stream. We'll have that, once you help me build it all.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. We'll be talking about some of that separately, of course, in Discord and what have you. But yeah, I would love to have you involved, and we'll get that going soon. And one of our Adventures from the Stream cast members is a huge cyberpunk fan. So I'm sure at some point we're going to hit Low Life. At some point we're going to hit Low Life. Doesn't that sound great?
Sweet.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I've had a great time. I'd love to be back. And if you guys do want to play, because I'm trying to run more games now, because now that this writing is done for the Low Life 2090, I've got a little bit more time on my sleeve. So if you guys want to play a game, or if I can join your game, or I can run a game for you guys, just jump on that messenger and let me know, and I'll try and make it happen.
You know what? We'll try and hook something up along those lines. I'm pretty sure we can make something work. Maybe a good one shot over a couple hours or something like that. I'm sure we could make something work pretty easily.
Sounds good.
Because we can be smart, right? We can be. That's the important part.
No, awesome.
All right. Well, hey, Steve. Again, thanks a lot for coming on. We're going to get this one wrapped up. I just have to remember the right buttons to push here. So let me try that. You have any shout outs you want to give to anyone out there?
Oh, just thank you to everyone who's tuned in or who watches this later. Thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy, and good gaming.
Yes.